begin this evening's proceedings by an invocation by Commissioner Solomon Bulbelia.
Peace and blessings of Almighty God be with us this evening. As you wish, you may remain standing or be seated. I invite everyone to have a silent moment of prayer, reflection, or meditation on our proceedings today as we begin in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Let our prayers and thoughts before a session filled with words of wisdom, understanding, and learning as we seek to build out a reformed constitution for our beloved nation, Barbados. A moment of reflection. May our prayers be accepted. In the end, as in the beginning, all praises for Almighty God, the Creator, the Cherisher, and the Provider. Amen. Amen.
A warm welcome to each and every one of you this evening. My name is Senator Gregory Nichols. I'm the Deputy Chairman of the Constitutional Reform Commission. At the head table this evening, seated are a number of my fellow commissioners. I will start to my immediate right, Mr. Adriel Braffett, King's Counsel, former Attorney General of Barbados, Senator Reverend Dr. John Rogers, on the extreme right. Next to me is this evening's facilitator, Commissioner Christopher DeCaires. Next to him is also Commissioner Solomon Bulbelia. And at the very end is Commissioner Mary Ann Redmond. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the other commissioners. I see Ms. Shade Jemmett. I also see our Secretary, Professor Cynthia Barr-Giles, and Commissioner Khalil Kothawala. And behind him is also Commissioner Carrie Ann Eiffel. I apologize for the absence of our chairman this evening, who was overseas on business. I would like to also acknowledge the presence of our Director General, Ms. Gail Atkins, who is busy working behind the scenes. I'll now turn over the proceedings to our facilitator for this evening, Mr. Christopher DeCaires.
Ricky? Okay. Good evening again to everyone. It's nice to see such a large turnout. Yeah, so I'd like to welcome everyone here physically, all those who are coming in online, and of course the press, who have been very helpful in disseminating the message that we've been putting out to try and get as much participation as possible. So I'd like to give a little bit of a status update in terms of where we are, what we're doing, and what we have to come. Something that people have asked us in the last couple of sessions. We began a couple of months ago with requesting submissions from everyone. Our target is the Barbados population and the diaspora. So we're very keen to get everyone's views. As you can imagine, that's quite a daunting task. How do we reach everyone? So we've had quite a widespread approach, including town hall meetings, of course, which I'll come back to in a second. We've gone on the radio. We've had a number of brass tacks discussions. We've put adverts in the newspapers. We've gone on social media. Not something that I see a lot of, but I know the younger folk have been doing it much more aggressively. So we're going out there and we're saying we want to hear from you. I think there's a little catchphrase that we've been using, we want to hear your voice. Come forward and let us know what you think. And the objective is that we have been tasked over the next 18 months to come up with recommendations for change, as well as a draft constitution. Now, that's quite important because it does imply that we are looking to change it very specifically, and this won't be a set of recommendations that go up on a shelf somewhere, but there will be actual change. So we're very keen to make sure that as many people as possible can be stimulated and can give us their views that we can take into account. We have a website that's been created, and of course it's something that will be built over time, but initially we have the consolidated constitution now available online, and then we have this book also online, which is a number of questions and answers from Professor Newton that gives a little bit more insight. And we will also be putting all the various submissions so everyone can see in hopefully a very transparent way what it is that everybody else is talking about and whether you have a view on some of those topics. So the website will build, and I'm hoping that people will be more interested in it as we go along. The town hall meetings we've started, this is the third of the more general ones when we're opening it to whatever you want to talk about, and then we will break it down more into themes, sort of thematic sessions where we will go in to very specific topics that may be a smaller group of people who have much more focused discussions or comments on. And that will start within the next 2 or 3 weeks in November. And we will start in the more general area of the Charter, the spirit of Barbados, that type of thing initially. And then we'll go work our way through into the rights and citizenship and other aspects, all of which will be a little bit more focused than the general ones that we've had so far. But in addition to that, we have a separate committee that's been meeting with about 50-odd groupings of people, organizations that have a vested interest in and have indicated they wanted to make submissions. So we've engaged with them. I'll just let everyone settle at the back. There are a couple of seats in the front, and I don't think any of the commissioners are biting tonight, so please feel free to come down and sit here. So we are going to engage in asking those groupings that have very specific interests to submit their proposals. They're likely to have gone into it in a lot more detail. And we will have meetings also to get a better understanding, not just receiving the submissions. At the same time, we have, and all this is going on concurrently, we also have a research grouping, including a number of research assistants, both graduates and students, who are helping the commissioners. And we break this obviously down in committees and so on, that's how we're working, who will be analyzing not only the submissions that are being sent to the commission, but also what's happening in the rest of the world in terms of other constitutional reforms generally, what's happening worldwide. So we're going to be as broad as we can, and then when we get all this together, we all have to, and we will do it, as I say, concurrently and in a phased manner. So once we start one phase and get into the information, we will start looking at drafting the work that we have to do. And we will also then have internally, as you can imagine, some interesting debates as we get down the line, because not everything is going to be absolutely 100% agreed by everyone. There will be conflicting situations, and we will have to try and find the best way through all of that. And then we will finalize the drafting of the report and submission to the President, I believe, at the end of the time, which we've got maybe another 15 months left. Having said that, many commissions have extended time, but we've been asked not to do so this time around. So we are trying to be as focused as we can and as organized as we can, but it's a very complex area. So even in tonight's meeting, we would sort of ask for your agreement to move on a very organized basis. There's a lot of people here tonight. What we've been doing is asking everyone to come to the mic and first of all say who they are so we can record you. If you don't really want to be saying, you can actually be anonymous, but we would prefer to know who you are in case we need to get back to you. And please try to keep your submissions as short as you can. The time frame we're looking at the ideal would be 3 minutes, but maybe 5 minutes may be necessary in some cases. But if you could be as succinct as you can and perhaps not deliver a sermon at this session, maybe we'll have one later on for that. But if you can do that, then we'll get a lot more submissions in tonight. We would like to finish off by 7 o'clock. If we are really getting very excited, we might want to extend that a little bit, but I'll try and aim for 7 o'clock. So I won't try to cut you off too much, but please bear in mind that there are a lot of people here that we would like to include. And there are people also online that we would also like to bring in their questions from time to time. So I'll open it out for your questions and submissions, because what we're really here for is to listen to you. So I open the meeting for any submissions. Please come down to the microphone in the front if you wouldn't mind, and we can get started. I'll have this gentleman, the gentleman in the red, whose face I think I recognize, but I better not call him out too early.
Hi, good evening, Commissioners.
For those tall folk, if you wouldn't mind raising the mic up a little bit.
Nazi. Okay. I didn't expect to be up here so quickly, but that's good. A wise gentleman once told me that you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And I'm here this evening because my feeling is that in the area of government finance and accounting, I pick up my papers and I read that Water Authority doesn't have accounts for the last 4 years. I see that the Public Accounts Committee is unable to function because there's no leader of the opposition. I see the Auditor General make his report every month or every year, but nothing comes of it. And I think it's time, now that we have the opportunity to change our Constitution, that we need to embed certain financial aspects that apply to the private sector, like publicly traded companies, where the accounts of government departments and ministries need to be done by qualified independent auditors and put in the public record, like in the newspaper, like everybody else. I think this would create an environment of transparency, and it would allow for the public, the shareholders, to know exactly what's going on with the government, their finances, the transport board, the hospital, the Water Authority, all of these agencies, and bring some clarity to the whole picture. Because I do not understand how you can hold the government accountable and they don't even know what the real numbers are. I have always believed that numbers do not lie, even though they can be made to. But if the records are transparently done according to generally accepted accounting principles, and things are uniform across the board, a lot of the confusions and questions that we have as taxpayers would no longer be relevant. And that's basically where I'm coming from today. There are several other things that I could touch on, but as I'm opening the batting, I would just touch the ball and allow other people to come in and have their say. Thank you.
Can we just get your name for the record?
I'm Carl St. John. You good?
Please, yeah.
I prefer to remain anonymous. And there are no moderators here to shut me up, so I'm grateful that I could actually speak for a while. You don't know me. nor you. Yeah, I have issues with the whole concept of this chapter 3, protection of fundamental rights or freedoms of the individual, section 21, protection of the freedom of assembly and association. I can submit my things in 4 details, that's not a problem. I just need to explain and flash a bit on it, that's all. I personally don't have a problem with people meeting in groups. The manufacturers can meet in a group. I'm a cultural industrialist, we can meet in a group. We can sort out our stuff. The people who are involved with healthcare, people that like turtles, saving the reefs and the beaches and small environmentalists, they can meet in their own group. Freedom of assembly should apply to that. I have not a problem with that there. Because they have a natural interest that they all share, a progressive interest that in the end will serve in the interest of the rest. And if there are indeed conflicts of interest between these groups, like the rural people will conflict with the urban people, but they can conflict with me because I play guitar, right? And the religious people might conflict with the religious people, but they're not going to conflict with the rest. So, association is fine at that level. And all of us are on one side of the river, and all we want is to cross the river to prosperity, Either we got to dive under the river or jump over, but it's a nice, amazing bridge built called government policy that allows us to move from one side to the next. Big sign, government policy. But they got a group of people. There's always a group of people who meet. Not because they want to look after the rivers or they want to see the best interests of cultural industrialists and stuff. They don't represent me for one reason, and that's to win an election. And that is where I have a problem. Because as far as I am concerned, there should be no right in Barbados for a group of people to meet just to win an election. Because that usurps everything. That undermines everything. That says if you want to cross this river from one side to the I turn it like a priest, not like a pastor, man. I got my hand in the air. One side of the river to the next side, you have to pass this bridge. And we at the knoll at the bridge saying if you want to pass this bridge, you got to come through me. You have to come through me. I am the political party in control of this bridge. And all your special interests can meet all you want. But when they're going from that side, Mr. Nichols, you ain't gonna listen to me. From one side to the other, you have to pass this bridge, and I am the knoll in charge, and I'm gonna take a toll from you. I will determine who your minister is. I will determine by appointment who your senator is. And you ain't getting a place in the cabinet because we determine. You see, the problem with the lower house. The lower house is divided in constituencies. That'll go back to 1625 or when there are all these rich people that own land and they need a little house of assembly to operate in. It doesn't matter which part of Barbados you came from, your interests were the same. I got land, I'm a person of means. Whether I come from St. Lucie or I come from Christchurch South, or I think they only had 6 parishes back then. Geographical jurisdiction meant something because we all had the same interests anyhow. It's just a matter of filling numbers. Come 1951, adult, whatever it is called, rather than assume that this geographical thing ain't gonna work no more, Labour was somehow confused into believing this house worked for all them people of means. In its present design, it can work for you too. So you can get into this house, you can build numbers and you can get in this house. Don't mind that the people who have been in this house before have always been people of means. But Labour don't have no means really. But somehow they fell for this adult suffrage and they fell for all of this constituent by geography thing. And now here we are stuck with representation that don't mean nothing. Because I don't care who is in the house of the lower house. I really don't care. They don't represent me. People that represent me are from either small business or cultural industries. I am divided by a demographic, not a geography. I'm sorry, and that is a single change that was not met. So there ain't nothing I could come at this table and say, well, I don't expect that a political party is going to, exclude itself from going forward. You're going to be asking a problem to solve a problem, and problems don't solve problems. So the least I can do is offer you stage 2. Stage 1 is remove the right of political parties to exist. I'm sorry, just get rid of them. That would solve everything moving forward. But that's not going to happen. So, at least I can only speak for me as a cultural industrialist. I can't speak for the manufacturer, but I'm a manufacturer too. I can't speak for the environmentalists or the farmers. Or 1 seat should be reserved in the Senate for cultural industrialists. I mean, the teachers could come and claim the same thing too. I don't speak for them, but they can make the same claim. 1 seat in the Senate for cultural industrialists, and let us determine who gets that seat. I want no appointment, nothing, because you have the prime person appointing a committee who will appoint that person, and that person never comes through us. We have no representation as any small grouping involved, not even the young people. They have to go to the troll and say we want to be represented. I got 5 seconds left. Oh, 5 minutes so far. So point 2 is I want a seat designated that the people of this particular small interest group can determine who sits in that seat and eradicate this need for appointment. Senatorial appointments by appointment, senatorial seats by appointment, I think is an absolute waste of time and a further consolidation of power to the knoll. I have all these notes but in my head. The third thing, of course, is like I said, details, but I'm just fleshing it out here. I'll put them in. The third is the power of the Prime Minister, which we know is exceedingly large. And I think that the question, the comment that was made 2 weeks ago, he didn't go into this part of it, but he says, let's fix the term. He said, because he didn't want to have difficulties with overrunning or understepping the term, let's fix the term of office to 5 years, done, or 4 years like the Americans do it, done. Fix it. And that way the Prime Minister will not have power over the lower house or over the Senate or over every single appointment in the government, because that is a threat. You got a job today, tomorrow you can be looking for a job because I can call an election. I think that power should be removed from the Prime Minister. And that's the reason why I think they should be. And number 4, quickly, this whole concept of state. Oh, okay.
If I can suggest, maybe just take an intermission, and then you can come back with the other points. Let's rotate it around a little bit.
Yeah, no, okay, I'm sorry for going over.
No, but maybe we could cut it here now, and then you can come back. Let some others have
I just hope I made some kind of a sense, that's all.
Yeah, thank you. The young lady here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would prefer to remain anonymous. My query or my concern is with regards to the Ford Commission's recommendation that the text of the Reform Commission be gender neutral. We started out this afternoon with a prayer to Almighty God. Outside of that, Barbados' anthem makes reference to the fact that the Lord has been the people's guide. That same Lord has a text, and in the first book of that text, it speaks to the fact, or it was recorded, that he created them male and female, 2 genders. Now, with regards to this whole gender neutrality, we have a tendency to copy things that we see from other jurisdictions. Right now, if we were to look at the madness that is going on, and I don't use that term lightly, it is madness, that you have young children who are too young to make a decision as to whether they can vote. They are too young for them to buy or consume alcohol. They are too young for them to live on their own. They are deemed too immature for them to drive or for them to own property or to enter into any kind of legal agreement. but then you have them as young as they are who have a very tenuous grasp on reality, because really and truly, little children will tell you that they believe in what? The tooth fairy, they believe in Santa Claus, they believe in the boogeyman underneath their beds, and then you have this whole thing where they can make decisions as to whether they wake up this morning and they feel that they're a rat, or they're a cat, or they're a princess. We're going down a slippery slope. It is not everything that we see copied in other jurisdictions that we need to copy. And I do believe that if we claim that the Lord has been the people's guide, in his infinite wisdom, he knows that he created two genders, and we should not even make provision for that within the laws that will govern this country.
Thank you.
My name is Angela Clark. I'm a business person here in Barbados. I'm a Guyanese-born Canadian citizen, married to a Barbadian, been here since 1995, and I can only have permanent residency. I would like to see the Constitution changed so that I'm given all the privileges as a citizen. I also contribute to society in every way, socially and economically. And I am a Christian, by the way.
Thank you. Can I just get this gentleman in the back, and then there's a young man here in the blue shirt, and Michelle.
Good evening. My name is Michael Rapley, for the record, and I wanted to come here today to make a case for the inclusion of sexual orientation, gender identity, and perhaps even gender expression in the Constitution of Barbados. Tonight, I'm representing an organization, Equals, that was founded on the need to create safe spaces for the LGBTQ community and improve the access to services for them. This need stemmed from the fact that members of the community did not feel like they were spaces where they could freely express themselves without persecution, be it verbal harassment or physical violence. Indeed, members of the LGBTQ community still do not feel safe to come up here and speak their truth. And the reasons why they don't do that is because those who've come before have had death threats, have insufferable working conditions, and have even been evicted from their homes. According to some people, though, there is no discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community in Barbados. But might I remind everyone that just because you do not discriminate, see discrimination occurring, or hear about it, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen. It's easy to discard the realities of others when we don't actively seek to know about the realities of them. We often hear the argument that there's no proof. It's easy to say there's no proof of something when the systems in place do not only allow for certain things to not be recorded, but the same systems fail to act on the incidents that actually are reported. Equals has been using a tool called the Shared Incident Database as a resource for marginalized groups to report cases of human rights violations since the end of 2017. Since then, we have recorded 106 cases where only 8% reported those cases to the relevant authorities. Many persons have indicated to us, including those who incline not to submit to the database, that they don't do so because the police either reject reporting the case, act very insensitive when they are reporting the case, or when the person asks for a copy of the report, it can be found. But what exactly does the community face when it relates to discrimination? Well, 70% of the cases on record face verbal abuse, while 43% experience physical violence. The next highest type of discrimination was in the form of being forced to leave the home, which made up 13%. Other forms of discrimination recorded include being denied services, being fired from work, or being denied educational opportunities. In addition, a 2014 to 2015 study conducted by the National HIV/AIDS Commission on the discrimination experienced by key populations, of 200 respondents, 92% indicated that they had experienced discrimination, where 68 cited discrimination was based on their actual or perceived sexual orientation, and 20% on their gender identity. Again, verbal abuse was the most prevalent form of discrimination at 80%, but the second highest form of discrimination in this study was being denied access to services at 23%, and the third was having their well-being threatened, 19%. You may think that verbal abuse may be an insignificant form of discrimination, but we were reminded last week that words have power. So if someone is constantly being told that they are abominations and disgusting, then they will eventually believe it, which is why LGBTQ+ persons are 4 times more prone to mental health issues such as anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts. It was clarified in last week's discussion that the Constitution should indeed protect the minority and not the majority, and in 2021, a study of 27 countries by Ipsos saw 9% of respondents identifying as LGBTQ, 80% identifying as heterosexual, and 11 stated that they do not know. I personally would say that 9% plus of the population deserve to be protected under law. And just to clarify, all these identities related to being attracted to or having intimate relations are with other consenting adults, for those who might be unsure of the parameters on which we speak. We will, of course, be making a formal submission, attaching all the various reports and evidence to support our suggestion of the amendments of the Constitution. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Before we begin, right? This way.
Is everyone in the audience hearing the presentations okay? Yeah? Okay. I think it's maybe we have a little fan behind us that's blowing against, but, or maybe just some of us are a little old. Please go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Jabari Jones. My contributions today are related to corruption, public health, and youth involvement in politics. Firstly, corruption is a cancer which is the root of many social, environmental, and economic problems. If not controlled, it may lead to a loss of public confidence in the government and its institutions, the acceleration of poverty and inequality, societal decay, revolution, or the eventual collapse of the state. We are already seeing a manifestation of this through the rise in violent crime and chronic low voter turnout. The time has come to correct this. The time to correct this is running out, and we must take action now. The Constitution should provide stronger protections against corruption, including public disclosures of the assets for all candidates running for public office, along with officials in Parliament, heads of government ministries, and other senior government officials. It should also provide for heavy fines, lengthy custodial sentences, and the appropriate institutional framework to meaningfully detect, punish, and deter corruption. Secondly, sugary and salty foods are a major contributor of many non-communicable diseases. Many members of our society are unaware of the long-term health implications of food high in sugar, salt, and fat. What is even more alarming is many of us do not know how to determine if food is high in sugar, salt, or fat. I was unaware of how to read nutrition facts well into my teenage years. Understanding nutrition facts is critical to evaluating the perils of many of the foods in our diet. Most of the drinks served at school and at bars and sold at supermarkets and at social events are terrifyingly high in sugar. But what are we to do if we do not know or if we do or no alternatives exist? This, when coupled with sedentary lifestyles that has categorized our car-centric transport system, there is no wonder we are fraught with the health problems we have today. For those of you who do not know what a sedentary lifestyle is, a sedentary lifestyle is a lifestyle where you are inactive and have very little physical activity. To address this, the Constitution should provide a right to public health. To safeguard this constitutional right, the government must provide more support to promote alternatives for adults, and especially for children at a young age where bad habits develop. This would include a massive education campaign, warning labels on products, promotion of the right to safe infrastructure for walking and cycling, and the appropriate tax regimes to promote healthier foods. Lastly, the Constitution should provide mechanisms for greater youth participation in political life, in the shaping of both legislation and policy. Additionally, before any legislation is created or any policy is formed, an analysis of the impact on vulnerable groups should be conducted and consultations held with them or groups representing them. Vulnerable groups include the youth, the poor, the elderly, the disabled, the homeless, and other groups. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope the government will consider seriously my proposal.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening to all. I begin this evening by my name, Michelle Edwards. I begin this evening by saying not all the proposed changes are bad or wrong for our nation as it progresses into a republic. Only one thing is constant in life, and that is change. But hopefully we mean change for good. The polls showed that just over 1/3 of Barbadians supported a move to a republic, with another 1/3 largely neutral and a third against it. We as a democratic society have always allowed freedom of speech, the right to make commentary in the press, on brass stacks, social media, and the title of these town hall meetings, Have Your Say, suggests that it is still the case, even if only figuratively. Allow me, therefore, a few minutes to have my say. I am a 3-generation Barbadian. There are some entities and voices that apparently are speaking louder than the majority of Barbadians who are God-fearing. There is a call to remove prayer from public places before meetings and forums, and to make Barbados a secular nation. To take the mention of the name God out of the Constitution and replace it with Creator. Well, Creator is just one of the things that he does. It is his job description. I would not like to be known by my job description. I would like to be known by my name, which is God. God, God, God. It is God that created heaven and earth. And all of us, in his own image. Are we going to rewrite history then? Are we going to take him out and forget about him? Is this how we give him thanks for what he has done? The Lord has been the people's guide for past 300 years. With him by our side, we have no doubts or fears. So we're just going to forget about him and move right along. I've been a part of the workforce, paying my taxes and NIS contributions for the past 47 years. Recently, upon retirement, I applied to the NIS for my state pension. It happened that this coincided with the recent reports in the news about the grave concerns for the present dire state of the NIS coffers. I became immediately alarmed about my own future, the future of my children and grandchild, the future I have worked so long and hard to secure, so that in my twilight years, I would retain a certain level of comfort, albeit, however, minuscule. We've been told that Barbados has a shortage of 80,000 people in the workforce. This may explain why we are importing labor from countries such as Ghana and Cuba and such like. Will they be made to pay taxes and NIS as normal citizens of Barbados do? I certainly hope so. Back in 2002, we have been told by the NIS that the ratio then of contributor to non-contributor was at 3 contributor to 1. By 2016, that ratio changed to contributor to non-contributor, 1 to 9. This is shocking. This is largely contributed by the family planning efforts. And in 1983, the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act changed and made abortions legal. We became the mecca for that. That has had an impact on our birth rate. Since then, there has been a shocking decline in the birth rate, and this has been corroborated by agencies such as PAHO and others. I'm getting to the point. In 1950, the annual births stood at 36,155. By 1970, 22,278, 80, 17,840. 2000, 14,017, and in 2020, 10,639 births for the year in Barbados. Does anyone remember the Barbados Suez crisis fiasco in 2018? when in Hastings the sewage overflowed and floating fetuses were seen in the street. Does anyone remember that? A pregnant female goes into the hospital in the morning and out in the afternoon, and there goes one more citizen dead down the drain. We're talking about gender fluidity quickly. The undeniable fact stands, whether we as human beings try to change, refute, or deny it. The fact is that 2 men or 2 women will never be able to procreate and produce a biological child. Not finished. In fact, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. This is impossible. Only our Creator, who is God of all creations, made man and woman for this miraculous and indeed incredible feat to happen. This thing that you all are referring to as sexuality is a miraculous, incredible feat that the Creator created so that, because He loved the world so much, okay? Look what we are doing with this. We're turning it into a mockery. And I will finish. Somebody else will make theirs shorter.
Michelle, can I?
I'm only
Michelle?
finishing now. It's only this last thing. When I find it on the back of my page.
Michelle, can I
Yes.
just interrupt you a second?
Yeah.
It's gone over 6 minutes now. I wonder if you could give
Okay.
a...
All right,
You can always come
just
back.
the last thing. I suggest that every right-thinking Barbadian make it a priority and their business to find out the truth behind CSE, this difference between sex education and sexuality education. We need sex education in our schools, but we don't need sexuality. There is a need for it, but not sexuality is a whole other story. We do not have time tonight to go into that, but the truth, let the truth guide you. It is a threat to the very well-being of all children of this nation and indeed the world. We as adults must stop at nothing to protect our children from this evil. We will be held accountable if we stay silent.
Thank you very much. Can I have the gentleman in red? And then next.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I will try to make my comments brief in the interest of time and persons who may want to share as well. I am not an expert in the Constitution. I do not remember names and numbers and different parts of the Constitution that need clarification. But what I can tell you is this. From my understanding, your responsibility is to ensure you have a document that governs the well-being of this country. That you're better able, as far as your wisdom and your intellectual capacity is concerned, to formulate areas that we as a country and a society can live in peaceful coexistence. I believe that is your responsibility. There's no way on God's green earth that you can satisfy that to every single person in this room or in this country. Therefore, there has to be a guideline or a standard that you're willing to go by in order to formulate this document. There are some persons here this evening that may not believe in God. That is their privilege. However, if you do not have a standard, how do you know where you're going to go? If there's not something that can guide you, what will you know as to what is right or what is wrong? As I said, I am no expert. I cannot break down the Constitution and tell you, well, this is right or that is wrong. But I'm assuming that all of you have a conscience. I am assuming that all of you recognize there's a principle that you hold close to your hearts, and therefore that same principle should guide whatever you decide upon after this evening is over. I will just share this with you quickly. We do not understand the ramifications of our actions sometimes until it's already past us. I would like us to envision something this evening. Imagine a scenario in this country if we go down the road of including individuals or recognizing individuals based upon their precept of who they are. A situation where we have children in this country determining for themselves their sexuality. Parents being forced to adhere to that and therefore having themselves in law courts because they do not respect that sexuality. Recognize the situation, you have these same children going into schools if they're physically looking one way, but they're believing there's something else, and persons being brought before the law courts because they do not respect what a child believes that child to be. It is madness. It is ridiculous. It is folly. Now, let me just add this. I would have heard from the gentleman who spoke before him. I'm going to assume he's a gentleman. And he would have shared on the point about what he considers to be his right and his privileges. All of us have rights as human beings to exist. However, we have to be very clear about where do those rights fracture the unity of society. If an individual believes something in their own mind, does that make it real? If I believe I'm a woman, does that make it real? If your mind determines your reality, how does society exist? As I said, everybody has their own belief system. If I believe I'm something, does that fit into how society can actually come together? Be very careful about what you decide here this evening. You have our country's future in your hands. If you do not recognize what is right or what is wrong and you're guided by your own minds, then this country is headed for chaos. I respect what the person would have said before. I respect what he believes as an individual. But there's no way we can actually accept everything everybody wants. We cannot do it. We have to be guided by something. I'm sure the other persons that have their own perspectives and they're able to share deep on this topic. I will close by saying this. I represent Family, Freedom, and Faith Barbados. We as an organization adhere to what the Bible says. If you do not believe what the Bible says, that is your privilege, but there's only one God. The good thing about God is that he does not need you to believe in him for he to exist. If you do not believe in If because of your intellectual capacity you believe that you're smarter than him, that is your privilege. I will not argue with you because that would be a waste of my time. I can simply tell you this. If you gentlemen and lady believe that you can incorporate all beliefs into the Constitution, you are fooling yourselves. You can only be guided by wisdom. And there's no wisdom that is greater than God Almighty. That's all I want to share.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just get your name? Sorry, no. Can I get you? We didn't get your name when you. Ryan Matham. Ryan Matham. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Maureen Holder. I'm not here to lecture anybody, but to get some clarity. I thought the lady that spoke before the gentleman, as she spoke about the referendum, I thought that she would have gone further into it. So I'm gonna follow up from there. When Barbados became a republic, I think the majority of Barbadians felt left out. And I think that outcry that came out just a couple of weeks ago concerning the move to change the name Independence Day to Barbados National Day is part of that frustration. And I would like to see, and let me revert back to this because I need some conceptual clarity in my mind. I keep hearing this term, parliamentary republic. I don't even understand what it is. Because as far as I'm concerned, there are two types of republics. You have either ceremonial or an executive. So if that could be, I suppose when you guys go back to the drawing board and work out everything you need to do, the chairman did say that you're going to have thematic themes going forward where certain issues will be brought to the fore and you will discuss them. I would really like some clarity on that term, parliamentary republic. And secondly, the whole notion of a referendum is the people's voice. It's giving the people the opportunity to have a say in legislation, to have a say in what they want to the people who they elect to govern on their behalf. As far as I know, we have a participatory democracy or participatory democracy. And you cannot feel as though you have a government that's moving so fast ahead, unfolding, releasing legislation that is not thought out sufficiently enough, after promising the people you'll come back to them, hear their views, get a sense of what they feel, and you will structure it. If the people of Barbados did not rise up a couple of weeks ago and cry out about this name change, we would have had quick legislation gone through Parliament. Barbados name change, no accountability. And I think we have to hold those whom we elect to serve us to a higher standard of accountability. Somebody spoke about prime ministerial power. I hope that comes up as part of the themes that the commission is going to cover. You have ministers pushing legislation as quickly as possible. I'm thinking in my head, I was thinking about it as I was sitting down there. How do you get to change a piece of legislation that you quickly pass through Parliament only to find out the people don't want it? Do you go back to Parliament and say, hey, look, we've listened to the people and we're going to change this and we're going to change that? Get it right. And I would like to see a constitution where communities are involved. The people's voices are in there. It cannot be a case that you say, I'm government, I'm the authority, so I have every right to pass this legislation. Hopefully a few woke people will to say a few things about it, but the majority will not say anything. You can't have that happening. And I find that Barbados is still very much divided. We have whites, whole set of white people banding together, whole set of black people banding together, and the Indians do it too. So I want a government that not only strives to be inclusive, but seeks to, or even a constitution, let me say the constitution, that shows that unity, that brings the people together, because this is a small nation. And I want to talk about victimization by political parties. That's an issue, because it has impacted on me. And I think here's a good place to talk about it. Here's a very good place to talk about it. We all live here, 166 square miles. I don't care if you're B, D, or C. If I have a view, I should be able to express it. We heard all kinds of people come out here and state their views. I have a right to be heard. I should not be victimized for my political views. And you cannot have a situation where every time you look at committees, you see an overwhelming amount of people who support one particular party. Where is the inclusion? We need a cooperative state government. I see the move to bridge the races. That's good and well. I respect that a lot, but I think we need to do more. And when we get to our constitution, I would love to come to all these various themes. The one that I'm interested in, prime ministerial power and referendums, and giving the people a greater say. And I haven't read this document yet, but when I get to it, I'm sure I'll have a whole lot more questions. I thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hi, good night, everybody. My name is Isadora Barrow, and I am an advocate and an educator. I want to begin with a quote from committee member Eiffel from the last public meeting. Constitutions are living documents that must allow for change over time to meet the changing needs of the society which it regulates. I fully agree with this statement and want to see this sentiment reflected as we craft our new fate. I believe that the Constitution should be reformed to create possibilities to include and protect all of our citizens. There are some who reject the notion of inclusivity, but whether they want to care for, recognize, acknowledge, or accept the existence of minority people, our obligation as a society is to protect the most vulnerable among us. To be clear, when I say vulnerable, I mean children who are subject to verbal, physical, and sexual abuse in their homes and communities. people with disabilities who are not able to receive the accommodation they need to live a dignified and fulfilling life, to elderly people who have been discarded and left to die in home or at their various institutions, to those left to fend for themselves in the wake of an ecological and economic disaster. As an advocate, I am also calling for the inclusion of gender identity and sexual orientation to be added to the language in Chapter 3 of the Protection of the Fundamental Rights and Freedoms of the Individual. I am also calling for the removal of buggery and indecency laws. While the rest of the world moves forward, there are some among us that remain subjected to the shadows and the recesses of our society. I want you to imagine a young Barbadian living in Canada, married to their partner of the same sex, enjoying all of the freedoms that the progressive society has awarded them. They are educated, they are skilled, and want to return to contribute to the society in which they came from, Barbados. But they can't go back to Barbados and enjoy the benefits that their heterosexual counterparts enjoy. Like the young man mentioned at the last reform meeting, what happens when they become sick? What happens if they die? What happens when the life they built together isn't recognized by the law? I want you to imagine a young gay man facing daily harassment, judgment, exclusion, threats, and acts of violence within his community. What do his options in life look like? What justice can he seek when his identity is not constitutionally protected? What options does he have for living a fulfilled life if his family and community has rejected him? If we recognize that heterosexual teenagers engage in sex and are at risk for STDs and pregnancies, then why can't we recognize that teenagers that are sexually active can have same-sex partners? Where do they go for education about the risks that they face? How are they supposed to assert their boundaries, understand consent about themselves, or take pride in who they are when the law doesn't even recognize them? Is it not important that they have a right to access education that helps keep them safe? What if this teenager is thinking of self-harm because of the rejection and bullying felt from their school? What mental health services or counseling is available when it is guaranteed they will be seen and respected for who they are? What services can they seek that are free from religious dogma as they are not prescribed to any particular religion? Again, whether or not others in society want to recognize, acknowledge, or accept minority experiences in this society, they exist and the law should offer protection. In the last meeting, there were sentiments that what worked in the past will work today. But at some point in the past, the rights that were being considered were whether or not some were to be seen as fully human, or whether some had the right to even participate politically. If we remain bound to these ideas and understandings of the past, we will never fully live in the present, and the future will become harder to see. When we write this Constitution, we're not only thinking about ourselves now, we are thinking about our children and their children. Will they want to live on an island that continues to restrict some from fully participating in society? I don't believe so. When the Constitution reflects a commitment to protecting the rights of minorities and the vulnerable, the greater will our nation grow in strength and unity. Thank you.
Thank you. Ferdinand, you had your hand. Then after Ferdinand, I'll take the lady in white at the back.
Mr. Chairman, Ferdinand Nichols. I'm here as a citizen. I actually have my passport over there to prove that, rather than an ID card. But I'm not going to take that on this evening. All right? There are a few matters I'd like to address to you. The activities of the past several months have demonstrated very clearly to us that we have a problem trusting our governments. And let me demonstrate it for you this evening, if I can. During a pandemic and a state of emergency, an election was called. that disenfranchised hundreds of people from performing their constitutional right to vote because they were isolated. In the Bahamas, where during the pandemic, persons in isolation were facilitated by the Prime Minister of the Bahamas to vote, did not happen here in Barbados by the decision of a singular individual. The second thing we have is the fiasco that has occurred recently with our educational system. And time will not permit me to expand on that. But I will say this. The Jesuits have a saying, show me the child for the first, or give me the child for its first 7 years, and I will show you the man. It means that if we get about indoctrinating children in their first 7 years, we'll be preparing the future of adults as we want it. And whether people care to acknowledge it or not, I'm not a discriminating person. You're a good friend of mine, and I don't think your color comes close to mine. I think you would have to spend a little more time in the oven to get close to this complexion.
I was trying this morning, but it didn't work.
I know, it doesn't work, but you and I have known one another for years, and we have been good friends. The aspect of racism doesn't exist in my system, because when I cut, I bleed red. When you cut, you bleed red. But we have had a system over the past several months that has demonstrated we cannot really trust our government. And let me deal with the last one. A few days ago, we were informed of a change to our celebrations. We were informed. Now I want to make a suggestion to you. We need some serious political revolution in this country. Very, very serious. And let me put it to you this way. We talk about a democracy, but let me remind everybody here what a democracy is. I think it was one of the ex-presidents of the United States that made the point. A democracy is of the people, by the people, for the people. That's what a democracy is. Having said that, I want to make a suggestion because we have a working model before us in the United States government. It is my view the people should choose the Prime Minister, the people should choose the Senate, and the people should choose the Parliament. As it stands, I want to make this clear. Maybe a lot of people are not aware of this. But when an election is won by a political party, the Prime Minister is not automatically the person who leads the party. That person is selected by the majority of persons in Parliament. And as we have seen in recent cases in the United Kingdom, the majority of people in England do not want the current Prime Minister as Prime Minister of the UK. But a decision was made by the majority of people in the House of Commons. This is how our system works. And then, to add insult to injury, it is the Prime Minister and now the President who decide who sit in Senate. Not a single person out here has any contribution to that matter. Not one. And I don't think I stand to be corrected. I think I've been around politics long enough to know that that is a fact. And I'm suggesting this evening that in that you are representing the people should choose who they want to sit in all three executive positions of government. Let me address the matter very quickly of the Republic, because I noted in the document that is being circulated that Trinidad and Tobago became a republic under the Act No. 4 in 1976. What the document does not show is that that act occurred on the 1st of August, but the Republic celebration was established on the 24th of September, when the first Parliament sat as a republic. Now I'm going to make a suggestion that some may agree with. I had somebody disagree with me this morning. But we are talking about cutting the vestiges of colonialism. Am I correct? We're talking about cutting the vestiges of colonialism. We have celebrated the Queen's birthday. I believe it is on June the 4th. Is that right? I think it's June the 4th. I stand to be corrected. And I want to make a suggestion. Leave my Independence Day alone, because it's a significant mark in the history of this country. Leave it alone. Instead, replace the celebration of the Queen's birthday with the Republic. That sends a signal to the rest of the world that we ain't joking about our Republic. It is just a suggestion which can be taken or ignored. Let me move on to one other thing quickly. You put your hand out, that means 5 minutes, you know.
5 minutes is gone. So,
oh, that's what
so
okay,
maybe wrapping
I'll be
up.
quick. Let me end quickly. I've heard a lot this evening about matters of discrimination and religious rights and all this. Well, let me just say this. You know, it appears to me that anytime you disagree with a particular group of people, you're considered a bigot. You and I ought to be able to have a discussion and disagreement without you thinking I hate you. I don't hate you. I will tell you what I hate. I hate you trying to discriminate against me because people seem to think discrimination only flows one direction, but it doesn't. And in so doing, what you're saying is because of what I believe, I am compelled to push that aside to accept you. And that's simply not going to happen. And if a constitution were to ever make provision for that type of violation of religious freedom, you would have a riot in this country. Right? So let's face a reality. Let's face a reality. You can't talk about discrimination and just have it one way. You have to appreciate the fact that there are other people who think differently, and we agree to disagree. Let me end with this. I'm standing here because I'm now a grandfather. I have 5 grandchildren, and probably before the end of my conversation, 6. And I was told years ago, grandchildren change your entire outlook on life. And I have to acknowledge that. I'm here because I'm deeply concerned about the Barbados my grandchildren will grow up in and what we leave the mess for them to clean up. And I would like, sir, to propose to you that in the consideration of these changes to the Constitution, we remember that a long time after this meeting is over and we are all dead and gone, there will be an entire posterity left to deal with our decisions. I thank you, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Niles. I want to address the question of the inclusion of the term sexual orientation in the Constitution. The term, and counter that question with what will inclusion of that term lead us? Where will it lead us? The term sexual orientation is defined as a person's sexual identity as bisexual, straight, gay, pansexual, etc. In 1975, Pennsylvania was the first U.S. state to add sexual orientation to their employment laws and was followed by Wisconsin in 1985. The term sexual orientation in those laws was defined as referring to homosexuality, heterosexuality, or bisexuality. By May 2016, every public school and college in the U.S. but was being instructed by the U.S. Department of Education and Justice to allow students to use restrooms consistent with their gender identity. So boys who believe that they were girls could compete in girls' sports and use the girls' restrooms, and vice versa. So following that initial inclusion of the term sexual orientation in the laws of the US in 1975, with one particular definition, laws in the US and Canada have evolved to include transgender status in the definition of sexual orientation. If we include the term sexual orientation in our Constitution, what definition will be intended? How will the term be applied in our law courts, in our educational system, within society? How will the definition evolve after this inclusion? My grandmother used to say, look down the road before you step outside. It may be a useful exercise to look at how the sexual revolution has evolved in the past in order to see how it will continually evolve in the future. And we can look at the acronym LGBTQIA+ itself, where we began in 1980 with just L. We went into the 1990s with LGB. By the 2000s, T was added. And as feelings evolve, who knows how long this acronym will get in terms of definition, interpretation, and application in our law courts, in our schools, in sports, and in all other aspects of daily living. If we include the term sexual orientation in our Constitution, what definition will be intended? How will the term be applied by our courts, our educational system, and our society? How will the definition evolve after this inclusion? My grandmother used to say, "Don't rush the brush and throw away the paint." Possible definitions of sexual orientation may be considered so that we can realize what definition we're dealing with. But there isn't one objective scientific list. And all the lists are not the same. On one website, I found 11 sexual orientations. On another, I found 47. And even when the same words are used, they carry different meanings. Different terms may mean different things to different people, since sexual orientation is, and I quote, ultimately determined by an individual on their own terms rather than by a fixed definition. I will just mention a few of the 47. Autoromantic, biromantic, pansexual, cupiosexual, fluid, omnisexual, homosexual, sapiosexual, and this is the one that got me, minor attracted persons, or MAP, which is an all-encompassing term used to indicate specific ages of attractions. So we get a pedophile who is an individual attracted to a pre-pubescent child, a hebephile who is attracted to a pubescent child ages 11 to 14, an ephephile is attracted to post-pubescent children ages 15 to 19. In his expert testimony before the Canadian Parliament in 2011, Dr. Jissaksem said pedophilia is another sexual orientation, comparable to heterosexuality or homosexuality. True pedophiles have an exclusive preference for children, which is the same as having a sexual orientation. In 2013, in a move towards, give me 2 more minutes, in a move toward destigmatizing pedophilia, the American Psychological Association distinguished between pedophilia, who desire sex with children, and those who act on those desires. If we include the term sexual orientation in our Constitution, what definition will be intended? My grandmother used to say, "Don't wait till the horse gets out the stable to shut the door." So I ask one last question. Where will including the term sexual orientation in our Constitution lead us? At the last town hall meeting that I attended, a gentleman testified about the tolerant nature of Bajans, how we have lived historically, peaceably, alongside homosexuals and those of other sexual orientations. My question is, will the inclusion of the term sexual orientation lead not to persecution of members of the LGBTQIA+ community, but to persecution, as we have witnessed in other countries, of members of the Christian, Muslim, and other religious communities who oppose, as is their human right, any ideology that goes against how they believe God created man and woman? Will it spark the worst type of religious persecution in Barbados? Will the inclusion of sexual orientation in our Constitution lead to a violation of parental rights, to gender indoctrination in our schools? Will our 4-year-old children be misled to choose their gender without parental consent? Will it lead to an increase in suicides from the stress involved with
Can I
living?
interrupt you a second?
One paragraph, with living a lifestyle that violates nature? If we include, last paragraph, if we include the term sexual orientation in our Constitution, what definition will be intended? How will the term be applied by our courts, by our schools, and in our society? How will the definition evolve after this inclusion? My grandmother used to say, God don't like ugly.
Thank you. So we have quite a few people who are interested in speaking, and just so that we don't cut off those ones at the back end, I wonder if we could just try to keep it to the 5 minutes, not you in particular, but everyone else, so we could get as many as possible. Thank you.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Veronica Evelyn. We are all different. We have different worldviews, etc., and we are entitled to them. But there is one thing that unites us. We are all citizens of this country, and therefore, in revising the Constitution, the one thing that should guide us is not any individual interest group, even if it is a faith group. The one thing that should guide us is the long-term, wholesome development, sustainable development of this country. My submission relates to Chapter 3 of the present Constitution, and I speak with a decided focus on the children and youth of today and those precious children that are yet unborn. Our collective duty towards them is one of care and protection. We owe them the gift of honesty and truth, beginning with the very language that will shape their thoughts and mold their minds. Article 1 of the Charter of Barbados includes the term sexual orientation. This is a controversial term which has been willingly embraced by fewer than 30 of the 195 nations of this world. The reasons for the controversy are what I shall outline today, while making a case for the non-inclusion of the term in the revised Constitution. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the government's mantra was, and everybody knows it, follow the science and act out of an abundance of caution. With respect to the use of the term sexual orientation, I'd like to suggest that a similar approach be adopted and that we both follow the science and act with an abundance of caution when considering whether to import this term from the Charter into the revised Constitution. And why do I say this? Because its implications will reverberate for years to come. And I think the previous speaker alluded to this. Now, sexual orientation is a term and is used to denote sexual attraction to and preference for one's own sex or another sex, the opposite sex. This definition pivots on the assumption that biological sex is non-binary and gender is fluid. These assumptions are contrary to observations based on biological fact, and instead they are guided by ideology. Biological sex is binary. Among humans, reproduction involves the fusion of two haploid cells. These are the gametes which contain half of the genetic information. The recombination of the two, and only two, that is binary, sex chromosomes X and Y during reproduction determines the biological sex of the offspring. Therefore, biological sex is an innate and immutable binary trait that is unalterable by psychosocial or any other factors. The existence of congenital sexual disorders and the existence of intersex persons does not negate this binary nature. Furthermore, sex is not merely a matter of external genitalia, but also encompasses various indicators, including the internal reproductive organs, predominant sex hormones, physical structure and development, voice, facial features, and more. Now, where did this whole controversy come from? The controversy lies in the modern divorce between biological sex and gender. Some scientists have advanced the notion that there is little significant relationship between sex and gender, and that gender is fluid. This is, however, inaccurate, and it is on the basis of this that I speak on behalf of our children. There is no use in teaching them an institutional lie. Despite surgical intervention and hormone treatments, which may make superficial differences to one's outward appearance, a male remains male, a female remains female. This is so because maleness and femaleness are a matter of fact, not self-determination. I should note here that even among those who espouse the term, there seems to be some confusion as to what really is sex and what is gender. Whereas previously, a popular distinction was that sex is biological and gender is a sociological construct. This seems to be changing, and what used to be called sexual reassignment surgery is now conceptualized as gender reassignment or gender-affirming surgery. Be that as it may, if the term sexual orientation is included in a revised constitution, how will it be defined? How will it be circumscribed? How will one determine boundaries? According to bodies such as the World Health Organization and International Planned Parenthood Federation, the term sexual orientation has to do with sexual attraction and preference. Soon finished. This, we have established, is based on modern ideology that sexual orientation is independent of both biological sex and gender, which themselves may be unrelated. 2 paragraphs.
Short paragraphs.
Yeah.
Short ones.
Yeah. I was told 5 to 7 minutes, I'm sorry, so I made it 6. These ideas continue to evolve while biological facts remain the same. Therefore, if we choose to import the term from Article 1 into the Constitution, we will tacitly be abandoning logic and common sense in favor of an ideological notion. This is not who we are. I propose that we do not include this term in a constitution that will guide us as a republic for at least a generation. The supreme law of any land cannot rest firmly on any evolving psychological ideology in any area, but must be grounded firmly on facts. Children and youth are our future. We cannot afford to mess with their minds. In deciding whether to import the controversial and unscientific term sexual orientation from the Charter into the revised Constitution, I implore you, gentlemen and lady, all of you from the Constitutional Reform Committee, I implore you to follow the science and act out of an abundance of caution. Thank you.
Sorry. So can I just make a comment? There seems to be a tremendous interest in Chapter 3, and there will be a specific session, town hall session in January for this. So I think we have quite a large presentation so far, but there will be a very specific one. So to the extent we can, as this is a general session, there are other general aspects. I would ask that perhaps those that have further aspects on Chapter 3 may allow some of the other persons to give the wider perspective. And also, we do have a time constraint, so I would ask you all to try to keep it within 5 minutes, because it means the people at the back end will not get a chance to speak at all. So if you would be so kind as to try to keep it brief.
All right, hi, good night. My name is Nia Brathwaite, and I will try to keep it brief. So I have some comments on a few different themes. First is democracy, the second one is the savings clauses, and the third one is rights. So I'll keep that bit short, give me your comments. Actually first, before I begin, I just want to clarify one thing. I heard mentioned that Barbados is a Christian society. I just want to clarify that since 1969, since the Anglican Church Act, Chapter 375 of the Laws of Barbados, we have been a secular society. So I think we should start from that base point. We have been secular. The church and state have been separated since 1969, and therefore we should not go about this constitutional reform through the lens of, through a solely religious lens, if you understand where I'm coming from. Right, so in terms of democracy now, my first point, so I believe that we should facilitate the greater participation of citizens of Barbados in the process, in the democratic process. So some of my suggestions would be, first would be petitions. And there have been many petitions recently in Barbados, and I think that to make them official and to make them have more bite, I would suggest that petitions that meet a certain threshold of signatories should be debated in Parliament. I understand that there's a similar system in the United Kingdom where people can submit petitions to a central database, and once those petitions reach a certain amount of signatures, then it's debated in Parliament. I think that actually would be quite useful in terms of getting Barbadians involved, and for instance, with the recent debacle about the name change of Independence Day and whatever, people can have an actual say that will be debated in Parliament. Another suggestion, when it comes to democracy, would be the right of recall. So I think that waiting 5 years for a representative who does not do their job, who you know that they're not doing their job, I think that the people should have a right and should have a way to recall those people. So similar to the petition, I believe that people, constituents in a specific constituency, once they reach a certain amount of signatures, should be able to then submit, a document, a petition, whatnot, to Parliament and have a right of recall. I think that would help greatly in terms of accountability. And I think it would help Barbadians feel more involved and trust the process and trust their politicians more, seeing as they know that they have the right to recall them at any point in time. Another suggestion would be Prime Minister's questions or cabinet questions in Parliament, where they set aside where the public can submit questions of national importance, of national significance, to have them answered in a public forum, to be captured on Hansard, to be broadcast so that people are aware of what's going on, and they feel as though they can interact with their representatives, and it's not just like town hall meetings or press, or when you speak to the press. Moving on now to the savings clause. So some of us may be aware that in Barbados, some laws that were passed before independence have been saved, and therefore they're still applicable. And this is regardless of the fact that whether or not they are inconsistent with our Constitution as it stands. And I think one that is not really talked about very often is Section 15, which is the protection from torture, degrading, and inhuman treatment. May not be aware, but the fact is that we have saved punishments that could be considered torture, degrading, or inhuman treatment once those punishments were lawful before the 30th of November 1966. Now, we think that is quite egregious. We should not, in fact, be having torture in 2022 or even going forward in the future. I think it's a travesty that we still have, for instance, the whipping. Whipping is actually still on the books in Barbados. I think that is a travesty. We should have nothing like that in Barbados in the modern society. And another point, I think I just want to move on very quickly and briefly to the section about rights. Now, I mean, we've heard a whole lot of discussion about rights, sexual orientation and whatnot, but I think that it should not be controversial that everybody should be equally protected under the law. I don't see how that is something that, well, I don't think people should be victimized, full stop. You don't have to like them, you don't have to agree with them, you don't have to think that they should exist, but you do have to respect them, and you should not discriminate against them. I firmly believe that religious rights can coexist with people who are LGBT. I truly believe that it doesn't have to be a clash. I think they can coexist. I don't think that the fact that somebody is part of the LGBT community means that that is somehow infringing on the rights of somebody who is a Christian. I truly believe that it does not have to be a clash. Everybody deserves to be protected based on their choices, whether it's your choice of religion, your choice of partner, your choice of political party. It really shouldn't matter. The fact is that your choices, regardless of what they are and who likes them or not, need to be protected equally, and people should not be subjected to discrimination, religious discrimination, discrimination based on sexual orientation, whatnot, because you don't like them. I find it very surprising.
Can I ask you to make a closing statement?
Yes, yeah, my closing statement is this. I think it is quite clear that people of the LGBT community are speaking about adults, consenting adults. I mean, I really think that we shouldn't have to belabor this point, but it's about consenting adults, not children, animals, dead people, etc. Right? And that is it for me.
Thank you. Just before this gentleman makes it, please come forward, but just before, I'll ask Senator Nichols to make an observation that he has.
Thank you, Chris. The last speaker just referred to savings law clauses, and just for the benefit of the wider audience, I'd just like to inform the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is our highest court, struck down the savings law clause in a case called Nerve and the state. And in fact, in 2019, the government was forced to amend the Constitution to remove the sector of savings law clauses being in conflict with the provisions of the Constitution. So right now, any law that was in existence before independence has to be read with the modifications and adaptations so that they can now be consistent with the fundamental rights provisions of the Constitution. So that is no longer a problem in Barbados.
Gregory, please go ahead.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fred Corbin, and I represent the people of Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. I'd like to begin by reading a statement by...
You have a very thick wad of papers there, and I'm going to ask you to try and keep it to 5 minutes if you can.
I'm accustomed to doing that. I'd like to read a statement by the late Haile Selassie, that until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned, that until there are no longer first-class and second-class citizens of any nation, that until the color of a man's skin is of no more significance than the color of his eyes, that until the basic human rights are equally guaranteed to all without regard to race, that until that day, the dream of lasting peace and world citizenship and a rule of international morality will remain but a fleeting illusion to be pursued but never attained. In 2005, 196 countries signed this document. Mr. Brathe would be familiar with this. This is the World Health Organization 2005 regulations. On the signing of that document, our constitutional sovereignty was removed. In 2019, the World Health Organization, the largest criminal organization on the planet, wrote this statement. then there is a very real threat of a rapidly moving, highly lethal pandemic of a respiratory pathogen killing 50 to 80 million people and wiping out nearly 5% of the world's economy. They told us what they were going to do. What we have today is a removal of our Westphalian national sovereignty, the removal of our constitution. And now we operate under what is known as the Global Public-Private Partnership. That's what we are governed by. My question to you, all 6 of you, what are you doing here? With the removal of the Constitution, with the removal of our Westphalian national sovereignty, with a 30-0 government with no opposition, why are we discussing constitutional reform when there is no constitution? One second.
Sure.
Without any further ado, let's cut straight to the chase. This document was written by the Pope Benedict in 2015 and published on 28th of June 2015. This is what is known as the Laudato Si. If you haven't read it, I suggest you read it. The most important thing about this document is that this is the global constitution that was debated this day in Sharm el-Sheikh in the Sinai Desert in Egypt. On the 13th of November, global leaders will pay obeisance to the papacy in honoring this climate accord, this global constitution. The constitution that you all are pretending to amend is based on this. It will be a global constitution that governs the world and brings into force a Sunday law. That's what it brings into force, a Sunday law, bringing obeisance to the papacy. My final point. Barbados was told that we had to abide by rules and regulations of a pandemic. This document highlights SARS-CoV-2 as an unrestricted bioweapon that has been foisted upon our population. This document was created by Dr. Li Mengyan, who defected from the People's Republic of China, who was employed at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and who we had the privilege of being involved in the United States military debriefing, which published this document, highlighting the global pandemic as a fraud. Second final point. What I hold in my hands is a new constitution for Barbados. And I quote, "Whereas the people of Barbados have affirmed that their nation is founded upon principles that acknowledge the fatherhood and supremacy of God and man's duties toward his fellow man. Recognize that inasmuch as spiritual development is of supreme importance to human existence and the highest expression thereof, it is their aspiration to serve that end with all strength and resources. Firmly believe in the dignity of human values and that all men are endowed by the Creator with equal and inalienable rights, reason, and conscience, that rights and duties are correlatives in every social and political activity of man, and that while rights exalt individual freedom, duties express the dignity of that freedom."
Mr. Corbyn, can I ask you to make a closing statement now, please?
I will close my statement. This is the Constitution of Barbados' newest political entity. It is the only registered political entity in this country. The Democratic Labour Party and the Barbados Labour Party have been winging it for 50 years. This is registered with CAIPO. This constitution will be published and distributed to every citizen of this country. Let me make myself clear. We stand for God's supremacy in this country, and we will not be moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
This will take all of 1 minute. I had no intention of speaking tonight, but my conscience as a medical doctor who actually went to medical school and has a master's in public health, as well as pursuing another PhD, but that's another story, could not allow what the previous speaker, Veronica Evelyn, said about biological sex being definitively only two things to stand. I find it disgusting that she twisted and used many scientific words to confuddle us tonight and to state a view that is definitively not supported by the scientific community. Biological sex is not XY, male, female. There are so many variations in between. So following the science, as the previous speakers said, compels me to let everyone know that in your lengthy diatribe, you were lying and twisting the scientific facts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I might be constrained by the statement of Mr. DeCuries because I'm referring in my presentation to what? Section 3? Of the, Section 3?
Yeah, please go ahead. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that there was a predominance of interest in Section 3, but there will be a very specific town hall meeting for that. So
Right.
to the extent we can also accommodate others,
Yeah.
if you could keep it brief, that'd be really great.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I take this off and I change my gender and I put this on, what do I become? Female what? Female what religion? Muslim. Muslim, ladies and gentlemen. And my point this evening is that everything that religion stands for in terms of the female is inimical to the Constitution of Barbados. Right. And I want to submit that 6 weeks ago in, what's the place called? Iran, a woman called Masha Amini, she was found guilty of allowing one strand of her hair to escape that covering. The hijab. What's not true? No, not cultural. Our Constitution is culturally neutral. It will be culturally neutral. Nobody in future, if I have anything to do with it, will be able to submit that there are cultural discriminatory points or cultural demarcations or cultural removals from our Constitution. It will be secular. Good? Our Constitution will show that in future. No female shall be forced to wear present mandatory hair scarf in public at any time or on any occasion. No female shall be forced from age 9 to wear mandatory hair covering in public at any time or any occasion. No female shall be denied the right or opportunity to participate in sports in which outer clothing must be removed. No female shall be denied the right to participate in Olympic sports which require participants to wear swimsuits for gymnastics and to expose necks, arms, thighs, and legs. No female shall be forced to wear clothing which covers the entire human body. No female shall be penalized for wearing scarves or shawls in public. No female shall be required to walk 3 steps behind her husband in public. No female shall be required when she goes out in public to be accompanied by a mahram, a male blood relative. No female shall be subjected to physical battering by their husbands. Where's the what? Can you? I'm not hearing you,
if
man.
I can ask, let's just,
I'm not hearing you.
in order for time
Right.
especially, let's allow the speaker to speak
Right.
his time.
No female shall be denied the right, to appear in public unaccompanied by male relatives. No female shall be denied the right to marry whenever she desires, to whom she desires, and if she desires because of religious or cultural norms. Now, all of this is in pursuit of the principle of emancipating persons in our society from what I consider cultural slavery. Oh, sorry, my name is Trevor Marshall. I have been accused of being a historian sometime. Right. And there are, how many men on this committee? 7. Adriel, your mother's still alive? Right, Dr. Rogers? Gregory, your mother's still alive? Yeah, Cecil, yours is gone.
My mother's alive? No.
Thank you. No. Ladies and gentlemen, of the 10 members of the commission, 7 are male. All of them, with the exception of the Careys, have the same rights as their mother, except 2 members of the commission, 2 Muslims. The youngest member of the commission, a 19-year-old gentleman in front of me, has more rights than his mother. He has more rights than his sister. He can appear in public without accompaniment. He does not have to walk 3 steps behind. Well, no, he's not married to a man, but he has the right to every kind of thing. His mother cannot.
Trevor,
now,
can I ask you to wrap up now, please?
And wrap up, right. And the point is that I will reappear in January and make these points, because we cannot go to a new constitution without and allow this travesty to continue. It is a travesty. In Iran now, people are protesting and are losing their lives simply because of wearing the hijab. And the burqa is one that covers your face entirely. In the 21st century, we have women being forced to wear these head coverings and face coverings. That is cultural slavery. Our constitution will be culturally neutral, right? And France has banned the hijab, and we must ban any covering which prevents our females. Look at all the other females in here. They do not have their hair covered. And do you know that within the Muslim religion, if any of you were to appear like this, you would be considered sluts. You would be considered persons requiring hellfire. You could be taken out in public, put in a hole, and stoned to death.
Trevor?
Now, that can happen in future in Barbados. And before I finish, I will reappear in January, I don't want to leave out the Rastafari. The Rastafari also subject our women to cultural slavery. Are there any Rastafari women in here? No. The Rastafari in their presentations are always represented by men. I shall reappear.
Thank you. Thank you, Trevor. The gentleman at the back.
Good evening. My name is Dave Weeks. Good afternoon, important persons before me. I stand here as a citizen of Barbados, born and bred in the amazing parish of St. Philip. My father was a sanitation inspector, and my mother an ardent housewife. I say ardent because while she never left the home to go to work, she never stopped working, from chickens, pigs, to sheep, to sweet potatoes, yams, bonavis, corn, passion fruit, and even a patch of sugar cane she grew. My father was a lay worker in the Christian Mission Church, going around preaching across this sugarcane island, while my mother was part of the sisters' band. Those who are in church will know what I mean. But what has this to do with this complex and heavily legalistic constitution? It is this. In order to eat a whole elephant, you take one bite at a time. That is, the complex begins with and contains the simple. My appeal this evening is to ask that you goodly folk, in framing the content, the principles, and standards of the new Constitution, not to diminish or discredit the effectiveness of godliness in the ruling of a nation. I repeat that. Not to diminish or discredit the effectiveness of godliness in ruling a nation. We all know that unlike Jamaica, with its bauxite, gypsum, tourism, and vibrant sports and culture, or Trinidad with its petroleum, natural gas, and asphalt, and love for party. Unlike Guyana with its gold, bauxite, and diamonds, not to mention Africa, with its vast, vast wealth of natural resources, Barbados has very little or none of the above. I recently received a WhatsApp message which said that when God created the fish, he turned to the sea. When he created plant life, he turned to the dirt. But when he created mankind, he turned to himself and said, let us create man in our own image. This is Barbados' most prolific resource, the God kind, our people, our only and most precious resource. Whether we like it or not, Barbados is streamlined towards God. We are his dependents. We don't have all the natural resources of other countries. We have us. We are who it is. I was equally amazed when reading Numbers this morning that God told Moses to create 6 cities of refuge for persons who committed murder, that they may not be themselves murdered before having a chance to stand for judgment. It pointed out that the priests played a pivotal role in this judicial system. Now, why do I mention this detail in this context? It is because I'm here to point out that nothing that we need for life on this rock has been left out by the Creator. There is much, much more evidence that God is integrally woven into the fabric of our very existence than I could mention. But this is not the forum for such, neither is there enough time. The biggest point I'm making is that we as Bajan people, because of the lack of a fallback of natural resources, need the most powerful resource ever, God. To seek to succinctly erase him from the pages of our Constitution, first via the Charter, and then more explicitly in our practice via the botched attempt at introducing components of comprehensive sexuality education, is a blatant mistake which will spell the doom of our nation, who have been known over the years to punch above our weight. Do we think we acquired this reputation by chance? Are there any of the money-hungry, godless nations who we are seeking to follow to get their money give it to us? No. It was the said same God who inspired the amazing leaders and people who pushed this 166 square mile dot of an island to the top, none of whom were perfect, mind you. If we think for one moment that we can maintain that status of punching above our weight while pushing the sovereign Creator out, we're making a sad mistake. Many are of the belief that in these tough times and near impossible economic times, we need more than God to get us out. I don't fault them, because the church has not taught otherwise. In fact, the church has proven to be a bitter disappointment to many of us. It has decayed to the point of almost becoming irrelevant to the nation, with many preaching a prosperity gospel, living large while their congregations suffer, and some leading immoral lives. I too have experienced this firsthand. The church has evicted many and forced them to seek solace elsewhere. Amen to that too. Yes, the Bible says righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach or an embarrassment to any nation. The church has been part of this embarrassment, and we too must repent. I, however, implore you not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Rather, I challenge you to pause and look more carefully at what God has to offer in the context of the technological times in which we live. It was his technology that built the pyramids of Egypt, the rock temple at Lalibela in Ethiopia.
Mr. Weeks, can I ask you to make a closing statement? You've gone past your time.
Coming down. I ain't got no pages. I'm coming down. And many Greek philosophers, we believe that many Greek philosophers learned their craft in Alexandria, Egypt. And many went there to study philosophy, medicine, mathematics, geometry, etc.
Sorry, Mr. Weeks, you've gone way beyond your time.
All right, let me go to the end.
Can I ask you just to make a
let me go to the end.
concluding
Can I go to
statement?
the end? Thank you. Okay. To us, this makes no sense, but we know that his ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are higher than ours. I'm hereby proposing that rather than pandering towards being satellites of others, we rather seek to intensify the standards, principles which innately have caused us to punch above our weight. Dependence on a higher power has not failed us in the past, and what has is men and women, including the church, who have been selfish, seeking to line their pockets and forgetting to care for the community, which has nurtured and given us the strength to punch hard, despite our small size. As they say, don't judge the book by the cover. Check what's inside. It may jump you. Barbados can jump the world again. I appeal to you, give God another term.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to 7 o'clock, and I think we've seen quite a few people, but I think there may still be a couple more that would like to speak. Can I just see a show of hands? Is that lady there? Please come forward. There's one more there. Can I say we'll take 3 more presentations, please? And if you can try to keep them brief, if you would, please. There'll be 4 presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak with regard to our Barbadian Constitution. As a Barbadian, my Constitution is extremely important to me, and I would like to pray that those entrusted with crafting a direction for our country would fully appreciate the weight of what we have given you to do. I hope that you understand that the decisions you take can impact not only you and I, but our children and our children's children. This Constitution is a possible turning point for good or evil. I am contributing because I want those charged with pulling together the Constitution to pull together a good one. A Constitution is not just for a minority, it is for everyone. I believe that for the Constitution to be considered good, it must contain certain things. 1, a clear and profound reverence to God that clearly indicates Barbados' dependence on God's divine intervention. 2, freedom of speech. As an individual, I must be able to say what I believe. That should be a right protected by the Constitution. Discrimination on sexual orientation and using things like gender terms, those can be a problem. Homosexuality is already protected because homosexuals, transgenders, they are people, and the rights of people should be protected. We don't need to be specific about homosexuals or transgenders. 3, the right to vote and to have a say as to those I have voted for have chosen to go in the direction that I support. The Constitution should allow for petitions. I agree, the youngster that came up and spoke about this. A petition should be able to be done with sufficient signatories to allow us to raise a no confidence vote. And then those who raise that particular petition should be able to go with at least 2 representatives into Parliament to debate that petition and that position with the parliamentarians as well in order, and it should be aired publicly so that everyone would be able to hear the entire thing. 4, the Constitution should protect individuals' rights to land. Government should not be able to force an individual to give up their land or set such rates on land tax as to effectively force poor people to give up their land. 5, there should be protection for whistleblowers, whether they are doctors, nurses, police, teachers. If they see something going wrong and they raise the matter internally and it is not dealt with, these people should have the right to raise the matter publicly without repercussions or consequences. A good Constitution encourages citizens to speak out in the face of wrongdoing. All and after all, the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing or say nothing. Financial accountability, this is number 6. In government, financials of all government and associated institutions and corporations should be completed and audited within 6 months after the end of the financial year. Failure to complete and submit audited accounts within the time frame should carry penalties of termination for the chairman of the board and a disciplinary warning for the chief executive officer of the organization, as well as one for the permanent secretary under whom the institution falls. 7, finally, a good constitution must be Barbadian motivated. Our constitution must reflect our beliefs and our values, not the beliefs and values of some billionaire in Canada or some president from America. It must reflect what we Barbadians hold dear. We hold our children dear and near to us. It must reflect what we Barbadians care about. Our Constitution must protect our children. The debacle that resulted in hundreds of school children and their parents being traumatized, private information of our children being submitted to foreigners that we don't even know who they are, was ridiculous in my mind. Today, no word as to how we will ensure that this doesn't happen again, or how the victims of this crime would be compensated. No word. The Constitution must protect against the abuse of children, specifically ensuring that our children are raised in the way that we, the parents of Barbados, want them to be raised. Not raised based on ideas of people in Sweden, America, Canada, and all of these big shot countries, but based on us Bajan parents. With that in mind, we do not want our Constitution to endorse any continuing sexuality education for our children or to legalize child mutilation in an effort to support the changing of a minor's gender from male to female or vice versa. We don't want that in our Constitution.
Can I ask you
At the end of it all, a good Constitution must reflect common sense. I have outlined some of the things which simply reflect common sense. I pray that those entrusted to prepare the Constitution would have the common sense to ensure that these matters are properly dealt with in our Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night. My name is Paul Messiah. When I came here tonight, I was very impressed at the first song that was sung, which reflected our national anthem. I believe that this is what the whole Constitution really is about. Now, I am very concerned that we are beginning to change our Constitution to reflect other people's. I think this is a very dangerous path that we're going on. We have somehow embraced our Caribbean citizens. We've embraced people from the United States, still keeping our Constitution, people from Africa, people from all parts of the world, and still keeping our Constitution. But it seems as though because of certain mindsets that have stepped in to our zone, we are now becoming the sponge of the Caribbean. So we are actually trying to please people now instead of trying to uplift our own standards. And I'm very concerned about this because we are craftsmen of our faith. We also are strict guardians of our heritage. And if we do not stand up to the forces that exist among us or the external forces, we would find ourselves at this particular junction in our lives trying to amend our Constitution in order to please other people. I believe that since the Lord have been the people's guide for these past years, that we should allow our Constitution to reflect such. We cannot go to places like Iran and have such a debate about changing their Constitution. So why should we allow other mindsets to come to our own country to change our own heritage? I believe that within the past couple of weeks, I'm very concerned that we have not been hearing much from our president because of some of the social issues that we're having. Does the Constitution hinders the president from standing up for the people? I'm very concerned about this because if we are only going to be governed by a prime minister and the president has no say when it comes to changing certain things that we are accustomed to, I think that we are going down a very dangerous road. So does the ruling government respect the Constitution? I would fear to answer that question because of what I see happening. So what I'm saying is that what I believe that we ought to do is to have more respect for our Constitution than to allow other entities to tell us as a people what we need to do in order to accept their lifestyles. We, I believe, should protect our heritage as much as possible. And since the Lord have been our guide for these past years, I believe whoever comes into our atmosphere, our zone, should also live according to the rules and the regulations of this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have two more. This young lady here. We have two more, a young lady here and a young gentleman at the back. Oh, okay. A gentleman at the back. Here he is. Yep, thank you.
Hi, good night. My name is Luke Lascaris.
Where's your mic?
Where's the mic? That's good?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Hi, good night. My name is Luke Lascaris. I'm just here to submit very quickly that I want to reiterate what I said in the last meeting. The Constitution should reflect human rights and should speak towards the rights of all Barbadians, and it should not protect just one class of Barbadians. The Constitution is not constructed either to protect the minority or the majority, it's to protect all Barbadians. So I want to emphasize too, the Constitution must speak towards the rights of women, it must speak towards the rights of the youth, it must speak towards the rights of the elderly, and it must also speak towards the rights of minority groups such as disabled people and LGBT people. As we know, the original Constitution, when it was constructed, was only formed to protect the rights of certain Barbadians. That would have been white, heterosexual, able-bodied, rich, cis men. And so this new Constitution that we need to construct as the Republic of Barbados needs to speak towards the modern Barbados as well as the future of Barbados. So it needs to protect all types of people because there are all types of people within our society. So I've come forward today to speak for all the Barbadians who may not have a voice, who may not be able to make it, who may be afraid to come up to the mic, to make sure that their voices are heard before the Commission. It's important that we all make our voices heard because everybody should be equally protected under the law and treated fairly under the laws of Barbados, and that all Barbadians should feel seen within the eyes of the law. I also want to echo Neil's provision that in terms of submissions to the government, that we should be able to create petitions in similar way to the UK, that they could be heard by the government once they meet a particular threshold, and have those submissions heard in Parliament and debated in Parliament so that our participatory democracy is more engaging to the populace, so that more people are heard, so that more people are seen, and the government doesn't just need to require on social media to be informed about people's ideas. I also want to emphasize that we need to create a provision in the Constitution that the office of the opposition leader is protected in the case that we have another 30-0 win, that certain committees and certain groups are still able to function as, like, let's say I can't remember if it's the Public Accounts Committee, can't function now because there's no opposition leader. So I just want to echo again that Barbados is a secular, sovereign nation, and that our new Constitution for the Republic of Barbados needs to echo this, it needs to enshrine this, and it needs to enshrine all the rights of Barbadians. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I would like to thank everyone for coming out. It has been quite a full conversation, and this is certainly not the end of it. There will be the themes, and as you look out, there will be particular interests that individuals have that may want to come back and be a bit more specific or add to what you've spoken about this evening. So we look forward to your wider and your continued participation. I'd like to thank the commissioners who are patiently listening to the various submissions. some of us are not accustomed to sitting down and listening for so long without speaking, so I must thank them. I thank the participants that we have online. Thank you for joining us. And again, once again, thank you to the media for your coverage of this very important topic. And as we go forward, there will be some more interesting discussion, I'm sure, that we will all be interested in hearing. So I think that's about it for this evening. Thank you all so very much for coming along. Please get home safely, and we'll hopefully see you in future events. Thank you.